Hello, everyone, and welcome to 1v1 with Boss Rush Games. I'm your host, Celeste Roberts of Nintendo Powblock and Another Zelda Podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Ryan Kuhn.
Hello.
And Michael Newton.
Hi.
Brothers-in-law who love brewing beer so much, they created their own podcast, Brewthers-in-Law. I love it.
Ding.
Yes.
Nice delivery.
I love it. So was that an easy name to come up with?
I give credit to my wife, Mallory, actually. She is the pun master of all of us, and she came up with that with not even a second guess. She just came up with it.
After Ryan and I twiddled our thumbs about it for 3 days too. We've just started now. When we need a clever name for an episode or a recurring bit or anything, we just immediately go hey, Mel, we need something clever here.
I love it. I think it's so cool. It is really awesome. So let's introduce you guys individually. So Ryan, you are also with Another Zelda Podcast.
That I am.
So what can you tell us about your journey there?
So I started as a fan. I listened to a few episodes here and there, and then I made a wonderful drive overnight down to Florida, trying to make it to a cruise because our flight was canceled. And in that process, both my wife and I binged all the AZP at the time. So we listened to every single episode while we drove, and we commented a lot. We talked to David a lot on Twitter and everything else, and we got close enough that we were asked to join as bloggers. Mal got asked on to do a couple, and then I hop on whenever needed. And then with pandemic, we have been asked to do a couple episodes as well. So we've done 3 episodes, just the two of us, and then one doing the quiz episode with the whole team.
That's a lot of fun.
Yes.
I enjoy those.
It was very fun.
You're going to be running things by season 5 at this rate.
I know.
What about you, Mike? What can you tell us about yourself?
All right. So I guess first of all, as you alluded to, Ryan and I are related to each other. He and I actually were like brothers-in-law. We married into the same family. We started dating 2 sisters at about the same time, so we kind of feel like that was a bonding experience for us. Coming into the same family at the same time. Got married within a month of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess aside from that, I'm also a big fan of Another Zelda Podcast, which Ryan and Mallory got me into. My day job, I work as a medical researcher. I work in orthopedic research at a hospital.
Oh, wow.
So not especially related to beer and brewing, but I think as we'll get into later, there's a little bit of overlap.
It's nice stress relief, I'm sure. That sounds like a stressful job.
It can be, yeah. It depends on the day. Our kind of the life cycle of our project sort of goes through the initial reading background literature and formulating the study design, and that's usually pretty relaxed, and then actually collecting data and analyzing it, and a lot of times there are deadlines we're trying to meet for grants and stuff that can be pretty stressful. And then the kind of final phase where we're just basically the technical writing, essentially we just draft a manuscript and submit it to a journal, and that's kind of relaxed desk work again. So it actually kind of has a nice ebb and flow to it. There are parts that are stressful and rigorous, and parts that aren't, and there are parts that are more creative and parts that are more kind of scientific and mathematical, I guess. So yeah, I like it.
That is really cool. And what about you, Ryan? Did you want to kind of allude to what your day job is?
I work in HR actually at the same hospital as him. So
that's kind of random.
I do a
Is
lot.
that intentional?
No.
No. No, because we're at different locations even. So
yeah, his is way cooler than mine. He's in this chic, googly new building with a bunch of restaurants and Ryan, I was in it the other day. I had to drop my laptop off, and I made a wrong turn and ended up in this area with like a foosball table and
Yeah,
kickboxing, and like we don't have any of that on our
I've
campus.
only been there
We're
a
on the
couple
hospital
times. Yeah,
campus.
yeah, but I haven't been in that building in a while, obviously, because pandemic. They've asked us to work from home as much as possible, so that's what I've been doing. But no, I do a lot of data entry, a lot of like auditing and stuff like that to make sure the employee data is correct and everything else. So it's a lot of tedious work, but it pays the bills and does everything else I need to do. So
Yeah, I think that's how a lot of people feel about their day jobs. It's a way to supplement your passions.
Yeah,
yes,
there's
And
something to be said for a job that allows you to indulge in your hobbies in the off time. Not every hobby can pay your bills.
no,
no, and I think there are pros and cons to that. I don't know if what I do for fun I'd really want to rely on to feed me. You
Yeah,
know, that's a lot of stress. That's a lot of pressure.
yeah,
But
it kind of sucks the fun out of it,
yeah, exactly.
or
And
it can.
what's the
I guess it
point?
can.
But so you guys, for fun, you like to brew beer.
correct.
And that is a very fascinating hobby to me. I knew of only one other person before in real life who brews beer, and I just thought it was the coolest thing. So, would you guys like to tell us about? Let's take us back to where this all began. Who would like to go first with a little history?
Ryan, you want to start?
Sure, why not? Um, college. I was living with a couple of roommates, and I was dating Mal at the time. And again, with the a connection to a brewery with her family, I kind of got into it. So I decided to, with my roommates, join in and kind of brew beers. There were a couple brewing stores near us. Michigan is actually a really big brewing spot. I think it's at this time even still it's like top three states with the most microbreweries throughout the states. So I think California and Oregon are up there as well. But so I got into brewing. We did a couple kits here and there, which a kit this literally has everything you need inside the box, and instructions on how to do it. So follow instructions, make beer. Um, After a few weeks of fermentating and carbonating, we had beer. We enjoyed it and decided to keep doing it. So did a few kits here and there, tried a few recipes that we made up on our own. So did that until I moved in with my wife because we moved into a two-bedroom apartment instead of having a house that I was renting with my roommates. So I brewed mead instead of beer, which is easier and takes up less space. So mead is honey wine, for those who don't know. And couple incidents.
I was going to say, arguably messier.
Arguably messier, yes, and I won't get into it, but
Ryan got barred from brewing in that apartment for a little while.
I was barred from brewing until I had a basement, actually. Um, so once we had a house, which we've had this house for a few years now, I've been brewing back into it 100%. Still doing beer, still doing mead, and making my own recipes from scratch now. So trying things that are very, very different. And so far, for the most part, I think I'm doing 90%. I'm shooting 90% on it. There's a couple bad ones here and there, but other than that, no, it's been fun. I love doing it. It's a great hobby. So
So you have to wait a few weeks before you can enjoy the fruits of your labor.
yes, about
I
so.
mean, you can push it if you want.
So it takes about a week or two to ferment a beer. So you're going to brew on the first day um, with everything else, and then you're going to ferment with the yeast. And that, like I said, takes about a week or two. And then you can do secondary with extra flavors, or you can go straight to the keg, or you can bottle it, which is difficult. It takes another couple weeks for that, but you could probably get it if you really want to push it, maybe a week and a half if you
I
really,
was
really want to push it.
I was going to say that, yeah, you could, depending on if you have like really healthy yeast, when you start, and they can probably chug through your, fermentation in 4 or 5 days. And then there are kind of riskier methods you can use to carbonate the beer really quickly, because that can take up to a week, or if you're bottling, like 2 weeks. But in a keg, you can kind of just like turn up the CO2 really high and roll it around and kind of force the issue. So if you really wanted to, you could probably be drinking it like a week out, but that you're kind of taking a lot of risks there.
So what about you, Mike? What was your introduction into brewing?
So it was similar story. So I'll kind of graze through the beginnings, but it was similarly in college. Our group of friends kind of discovered craft beer all around the same time. I think it was about the same time like the rest of the world was. There was like kind of that moment in the zeitgeist around. It would have been like the early 2010s, where at least around us, a lot of people were like slowly discovering that there were things other than American light lagers that you could drink. And so my buddy and I decided to try and start. And I still remember we made our first batch like in my parents' kitchen on the stove. And like, there's during a part of the process, you have to boil, you basically have like water with all the grain sugars in there. You have to boil that to add the hops to it. And they have they don't have a range, they have an electric stove. So, normally that boiling like, takes 15-20 minutes to get the water boiling. It took us 3 hours. We were just
3
like
hours
sitting there with nothing to do for 3 hours. Yeah. Because, we were trying to boil like, 2.5 gallons of water on like an electric stove. It just was not working.
That's patient.
It was pretty. No, we weren't patient at all. We were like, we had no idea what we were doing. But yeah, so we were swearing the whole time, like, what is God? This is so stupid. Why did we decide to do this hobby? And that one came out fine. But then I ended up rooming later with another guy who had pretty extensive experience with brewing, and so him and I did a lot together. And I was kind of his Lego Padawan. I was like the Obi-Wan to his Qui-Gon for a while. So we brewed for a couple of years together, and I learned a lot from him. And then stopped for a while, and then my wife and I have just kind of recently started brewing again at our house, and that's kind of when I first started writing my own recipes and stuff. So yeah, it's kind of been like, it's been an on again, off again sort of relationship.
Wow. And so as brewers, do you have a newfound appreciation for beer itself, just the process involved with it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think honestly, if anything, it's really given me to like a stronger appreciation for, quote unquote, like, cheap beers like, the Bud Lights and Millers of the world. Because I think once you start brewing, especially when you start brewing really simple beers like that, you realize how little there is to hide behind, and like how to like consistently make good beer with very simple flavors is actually really, really hard. Sometimes it's almost easier to dump in like, spices and some coconut and stuff, because then there's a little more going on, and like small imperfections aren't as noticeable. So yeah, ironically, if anything, it's really given me an appreciation for like Miller Lite.
Oh,
And then honestly, on the other side too, I again appreciation, but like how they come up with recipes is crazy, because everything's been done. So it's just like you think you've heard everything that they could do, and all of a sudden you go to a brewery and they're like, oh, we added this and this and this. And it's like, but that works. And then you try it and it's like, oh my God, this works. This absolutely works.
Yeah.
that is
Well,
so
and Ryan, I think you're kind of talking about extra stuff like
Yes.
chocolate or whatever.
Yeah.
But also just the base ingredients. There's a zillion options. The grains can all be roasted slightly differently, and there are all these different varieties of hops that all have different flavor profiles that are grown in different parts of the world. And then, you can treat them differently, depending on how your temperatures are, how you add them, what what like strain of yeast you use. It's like kind of a mind-numbing possibility space to work in. So it is. It's almost a little intimidating when you start kind of branching out into unfamiliar territory, just trying to get your feet under you, because it's like, there's so many options. It's kind of hard to know where to start.
I'm very fascinated by the praise for quote unquote inferior beers, just the run of the mill ones that people out or say, oh, this tastes like pee in a can. They don't get a lot of respect, but they're very popular. They're very readily available. So it's interesting that you said those are probably more complex.
I don't know that they're more complex, but I think people assume that beer like that is easy to make because it's not complex. But I think one thing that I've found so far is some of the more challenging beers we've made have been really, really straightforward because, like beers like that have a relatively small ingredients list. There's not a lot that goes into them, but as a result, like from a technical side, you have to be on point because any screw up, any tiny screw up is going to make its way into the final product. And so I think that's kind of more what I meant. Like, if you don't think it tastes good, you don't think it tastes good. And that's your opinion. That's fine. But I think the main thing for me is just that, it's hard to make like a light lager because there's just, again, there's nothing to hide behind if you make a mistake.
I guess it kind of, as you're saying that, it reminds me of how precise baking has to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The right amount of ingredients. Otherwise, you could really mess up your end product.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that too. So
I was going to say, but yeah, my wife and I have actually talked about that before because she's the kind of person that is like incapable of just following a recipe to the T when she cooks. And she's, over the years had to grudgingly admit that you have to be a little bit more precise with baking. Yeah, because it's like if you're cooking something in a pan or whatever, you can kind of go by feel, but like you have to really have a strong feel with baking or else you'll screw it up. Sometimes it's better just to do what the recipe says.
Yeah, it's okay to be creative to an extent, but when it comes to the baking soda or baking powder,
exactly.
I'm gonna have faith in what's written down. Oh, I love it. If y'all aren't watching this, they both took a swig of their drinks at the same time.
We texted about it before the show, whether we should. We decided it was good branding.
What are y'all drinking tonight?
Ryan?
I am not drinking any of mine. Unfortunately, I have nothing of mine on tap.
Yet.
So I'm working on one right now. So I just brewed that last weekend. So it's got a little ways to go. But right now I'm in a stout phase. So right now I am doing a crazy one actually. It's a Neapolitan stout.
Does it taste like ice cream?
It literally has all 3 flavors of ice cream in there.
Ooh.
Do you like it?
I do actually. So it's really, really good. It's crazy. It's better nitronized, but it's still very good.
What does nitronized mean?
So most beer is carbonated, but beers like Guinness are nitronized. So they use nitrogen instead, and it gives it a little bit of a creamier feel to it instead of kind of like a little bit rougher of carbonation. Mm-hmm. So like if you have a Guinness is nitronized every single time, no matter where you get it. And it just has that smooth, creamy, light taste to it and feel to it and everything else. So for a stout, it doesn't even feel like you're having a stout because it's nitronized. So.
Oh, that's cool. So it's a little bit smoother going down it.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, that sounds like a yummy one. I do like ice cream.
Ryan, who makes that?
Saugatuck, up here in Michigan.
Okay, that's in Michigan. Maybe you can get Ryan to mail you one.
I don't know. Can you mail alcoholic beverages?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
It's done for like competitions and stuff a lot, but it is kind of I think it's annoying. I don't know. You'd have to be really good about packing and stuff, especially if it was in glass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've never done it, but I think it's like totally kosher. Honestly, I don't know if there's like extra if someone needs to like sign for it or something to prove that they're like 21. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, like usually they're just wondering, okay, is there anything on here that can explode?
Yeah.
Right.
Whenever you're mailing something. But what about you, Mike? What are you drinking tonight?
I'm drinking a home brew. This is one that we made last month. It's called a California Common. So it's kind of like an amber ale. A little bit lighter, but it's like there's a beer called Anchor Steam Ale. I don't know if it's like available near you. It's kind of hard to find near us, but that's by far the most famous one. It's out of like the San Francisco area, I think. So yeah, you could look for it at the store. I'd recommend that one. But yeah, we were happy
Amber.
with how it turned out.
Okay. We have Abita Springs is a popular brewery down here, and they have something called Abita
Yeah.
Amber. So I'm wondering if that's similar to it.
It's probably fairly similar. Yeah, I was in New Orleans for a work conference. We've been a couple times, and they have Abita Amber's like the first tap at every bar down there. And it is, yeah. I don't remember it super well because it was a few years ago now, but I would say it's fairly similar. I
Okay.
remember liking it a lot.
Yeah, but a lot of people down here like to drink.
Yeah.
Popular pastime.
Yeah.
Are there any other kinds of liquor or wines that you guys enjoy?
I'll let you go, Mike.
Yeah, I'm an omnivore. I like pretty much anything. Yeah, my wife and I really enjoy wine. I like most types of whiskey, and then we took a vacation to Italy, and I fell in love with grappa. That is super good, but like really hard to find here.
What is grappa?
It's like a kind of brandy. It's made from it's basically distilled from the parts of grapes that they throw away from winemaking, I think.
Oh, okay. So, wow,
Yeah.
they're not wasting any parts.
Yeah, I think historically, I'm not don't quote me on this, but I believe it was like kind of for lack of a better term, like a peasant drink. It's like if wine was like for the rich people, then like it was just sort of a cheap way to make booze for people who couldn't afford wine. But then over time, now it's like kind of, first of all, it's hard to get in America because it's not super popular, but it's like, I think kind of more expensive now and enjoys like a much better reputation.
Yeah, I've had a couple of them that you brought home from Italy.
Yeah, we've served it up at a couple family dinners before, but yeah, my wife and I we literally bought a suitcase while we were in Italy just to fill it with like wine and grappa and ship it home.
Is that difficult to bring back home with customs?
No, you just have to claim it. But honestly, like we claimed the amount that we brought home, which was a full suitcase full, and they kind of just laughed at us at customs, because like the tax money, it's like it almost isn't worth them the time it'll take them with their salary to like write the paperwork to tax you for the tiny little bit. Is like it's not worth it. So they just kind of laughed us off. Like, yeah. It's like I think it's more meant for people like with huge shipments coming through.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, other than that, there's not really any considerations. You just got to wrap them in a lot of T-shirts so that they don't break.
Well, I had a friend who went to, I think it was Italy. What is that drink that can make you hallucinate? I'm drawing a blank.
Absinthe?
Oh, absinthe. Yeah.
Absinthe.
Yeah.
Is that Italy? France?
I don't know.
Is that Netherlands? I thought that was like Netherlands or something like that.
Germany?
I think it was kind of all over Europe, I think. I'm not sure.
I think their version is illegal here. We do have an absinthe house in New Orleans, but I don't think it's going to make you see green fairies. I haven't tried it. But she she went to Europe and she poured out her Listerine and put the absinthe in her Listerine bottle. And
Smart. Very smart.
That is so resourceful.
The United States government is listening to me. I'm not affiliated with that whatsoever.
Right, yeah, I do not condone what she did, but
I do not condone.
I will not give up her name.
No. She was like 18 or 19 at the time, which is way above the legal age in Europe and not so the legal age in America. So that when you told me that story, that's what it made me think of. So I'm wondering if you tried to bring a legit bottle of absinthe back, if they would confiscate that. I don't know.
That's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, my wife actually went to Germany for like a high school thing, and was old enough to drink there and buying stuff. And so she brought her dad, who really likes beer, like our father-in-law, a couple of bottles of German beer home, and like presented it to him. It's like, Dad, look what I got you. And he was like, you did what? Yeah, she was like 18 and like. She didn't think about it. It was legal there. It was legal to buy it. So she was like, oh. It just didn't occur to her that it would be a problem.
I wonder if the drinking age would ever be lowered down here. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, it's weird because there it's like, because it's part of the culture, I feel like it kind of works out where you don't have that thing that a lot of Americans experience where you go to college and you can, even if you're under 21, you can like drink for the first time, and then you have no idea what it feels like. So you have a couple of really rough experiences and maybe dangerous ones. Whereas like, I feel like it might be helpful to sort of understand what it does to you prior to like being on your own without your parents. But I feel like if we made the change here, because it's kind of already got the cultural reputation of being like a rebellious thing to do in your teens, we'd have like a generation of people abuse it before we got to the people that it was actually helpful to. I don't know,
it would be
but that's
trial and error for sure.
Yeah.
That's a tough one to. I don't know. That's a philosophical question. I'm not prepared to answer.
I feel like if we ripped off the Band-Aid, it would be good. But I think there'd be like one generation of high schoolers who are like, oh my God, we can drink now. And, it would just be really rough.
I mean, they're already doing that anyway. So let's just be honest here.
Yeah, there were definitely some people having parties. I admit I was very straight-laced in the DARE program, and instilled the fear of God into me. But I know there were people having some fun on the weekends. But what about you, Ryan? Or do you enjoy any other kind of drinks besides beer?
I am just like Mike. I pretty much, you put it in front of me, I'll at least try it. So I do wine. I do a lot of whiskey and scotch. I do gin. I love me a gin martini. I even find some random things out there. Like one of my favorites is called Pim's Cup, and it's literally a liqueur, and you drink it with ginger ale and a cucumber slice, and it's a perfect summer drink. So
they need to start paying you for advertising. Always name dropping the Pim's Cup.
I always drop the Pim's Cup because no one knows Pim's Cup. It's hard to find, and then even when you see it, you don't even recognize it because it's like $15 a fifth. Still, it's not that expensive.
Yeah. I feel like for at least for me, I don't know, Ryan, if you would agree with this, but it's like once you kind of get into trying different things, you made the baking analogy earlier, Celeste. I think it's really kind of on point. It's kind of like if you love food, you sort of you really get into trying and experiencing different kinds of food. And like, maybe you're really into cuisine from one country for a while, and then you get into cuisine from another country. Like, I feel like you can kind of reflect that into the world of booze.
Yes.
And it kind of works the same way. And it's like, they all have, like we're talking about with grappa, it's like, they all have really cool histories. And, like even beer has a interesting history that's like different for every country and for every style. And it's kind of a rabbit hole you can get into once you start like appreciating it.
Yeah.
It's almost like alcohol is the universal language.
Yeah.
In a way.
I think it makes some kind of alcohol in some way, shape, or form. So you just got to find out how they make it and go from there. So
I was going to say, it's one of those things that was like invented like separately in like every culture ever type of a thing.
It was necessary.
Yes, it's necessary sometimes. Well, if you guys go to Antarctica and can interview the penguins for me and find out what alcohol they have created, I would be most interested in finding out.
We have a cousin that's going there for a year where we can have him do some interviews while he's there.
For some research, he's going to be like in a research lab over there.
Yeah. He applied to some kind of research position down there. It's kind of weird, like all the onboarding and stuff during the pandemic, because it's like he had this big where it was like he had to be super careful because if he contracted COVID, like he wasn't going anymore. So that was kind of scary, but I think he's past that now. I think he might be there.
Wow. So can he talk to people, or how's the internet connection down there?
It's not bad.
I think it's like satellite phones only. So there's only certain times during the day, and then the times like change depending on the day, or like it kind of like, it drifts over time. So like the window like changes throughout the year. Yeah. I think they're fairly isolated.
Wow.
Seems intense.
I'm pretty sure it's cold all year round too. So
Yes.
he's got to bundle up.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you guys don't sound like beer snobs, I have to say.
No, I will drink a fancy beer like this that's crazy flavors, and then I'll crack open a PBR Pabst Blue Ribbon right after it. So I can drink anything that's put in front of me. I really don't care.
Yeah. I feel like if I had a beer snob card, I lost it when I officially endorsed Miller Lite on air a half hour ago. So
Now, is it common for people to enjoy some beer after working in the yard or doing something outside that's really hot? Is it very refreshing? Because Brian's raising his hand, and Mike's raising his hand.
yeah, our grandpa has this awesome saying where, like, well, if he's very handy. If he's ever helping us with something, he'll kind of stop in the middle of it and go, this is thirsty work. Do you want a beer? And
Yep.
it's like kind of become like a tagline of his. Yeah. Like there's something, it's like it's refreshing, but it also kind of feels like a little reward. Like, what? I'm working hard. I've earned this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the little carrot dangling at the end of the stick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, what are some of your favorite beers that you've brewed, or are there certain flavors that you really like?
Ryan?
I experiment a lot with the crazy flavors. So probably one of my favorite beers that I brew, I'm actually going to brew it soon because I brew until winter and I stop because I can't use the outside hose. But the last beer I brew is a stout, and I call it shortened stout because it actually has English breakfast tea in it. So it's a very, very good beer. It's great for the winter, and it's something very different. I have not seen anyone put tea in a stout, so that was fun to find and make.
That does sound really cool. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
That's kind of Ryan's shtick. He's always trying
Yeah.
to find something that something weird to throw in the beer that he hasn't seen.
Yep.
That's creative, though. That's
Yeah.
a cool way to try new things. What about you, Mike? You have any favorite flavors?
Like for me, I tend to be very seasonal. Like, I don't know, do you guys get Bell's down in Louisiana? Like, do you get Oberon or like Two Hearted?
That's a beer brand?
Yeah, Bell's is the brewery. But in any event, we have a beer. Bell's is a Michigan brewery, but they distribute fairly nationwide, I think. And they have a beer called Oberon that is like it's a summer wheat beer that comes out. Like it's a big deal around here because it comes on like right at the beginning of spring. It's kind of like the harbinger of good weather here. Mm-hmm. And then it comes out, and like most years, at least they, like, a lot of bars throw like keg tapping parties, like, oh, Oberon's out. It's like kind of like some kind of a rite of spring that happens around here. And then they stop making it around the end of summer, and then you have to wait for it. And something about that cycle, man. Like when Oberon comes out, it's like the only beer we have in the house for like 2 months.
I looked it up. I don't know if I've seen this around. I'm gonna have to take a look next time I go to the store.
Yeah, it's a very it really just tastes like summer weather in a can. It's very good. But yeah, I find that tends to be true of me though in general. Like I like things like darker beers and IPAs in the winter, and lighter beers and simpler, kind of more crisp, refreshing ones in the summer. So yeah, again, a little bit of everything.
Now I have to ask, because it is fall, Do you guys like pumpkin spice beer? I heard that's a thing.
We do have something coming up about that.
Yeah, we actually, we just recorded a sampling episode of a bunch of pumpkin beers.
What?
Funny you should. It's like you knew. Yeah, I promise. She's
It's
not
just
plugging
you
the
cannot
episode on
escape the
purpose.
pumpkins. They're in Animal Crossing. They're at
Yeah.
Starbucks. They're everywhere. They're in
Yeah.
the cereal aisle. So that's what made me think of it. But
Well, can I ask real quick? This when we actually started that episode, our kind of like icebreaker question to each other was like, so aside from pumpkin beer, or even I guess including pumpkin beer, but Celeste, what's your favorite, like, of all of the pumpkin and pumpkin spice things that come out this season? What's your favorite? Like either a baked good or a drink?
ooh, that's it has to be pumpkin, right? I cannot stray from the gourd.
Pumpkin.
Yeah,
Or
or
it
if
has
you
to
don't
be
like
involved.
it, but then you're least.
I like pumpkin. I really like roasted pumpkin seeds.
Oh, that's a good one.
I really like that. I really like. I like them more than sunflower seeds because you can actually eat the shell without
Yeah.
choking on it. Oh gosh. I love pumpkin pie. I love pumpkin breads. Oh, why do I have to pick my favorite? I can't do it.
That's fine. A top 3 is acceptable. You have 3
Okay.
tied for first place.
Awesome. Because I don't know. I like pumpkin oatmeal. I like pumpkins. I have no. I am not going to discriminate against pumpkin flavored things. But
Basically, you're a big fan of this season of food.
I like food a lot. But do you guys like pumpkin anything?
I was about to say mine was just straight up pumpkin pie. I'm a classic guy with that. I put a big old dollop of whipped cream and I'm in heaven there. So
Good
Yeah,
stuff.
I think I found, maybe minor spoiler for the episode, but like I found I'm fairly hit or miss with pumpkin beers, but I tend to like any like pumpkin baked goods, like especially pumpkin bread is really good.
Pumpkin bread. I want to learn how to make it because I don't know if the pumpkins are available here yet, but I see the cans like Libby's pumpkin, but I have read that is not pure pumpkin.
Really?
It's a combination of gourds.
interesting.
Interesting. Like squash,
It's
like
the
they use other
bologna
squash.
it's the bologna of gourds. There's a little bit of everything that's mixed in.
Libby's. I don't. Please, okay. It's saying it's 100% pure pumpkin, but I read somewhere. I don't know.
I mean, maybe it depends on the brand or something. That's actually when we were doing research for our episode, we found it's kind of a fun fact that a lot of pumpkin beer doesn't actually have pumpkin in it either.
Yeah.
They just sort of use all the spices that you associate with pumpkin spice, and it kind of tricks your brain into. Because I guess it's like kind of hard to get the flavor to come through because it's so subtle. So a lot of times you just kind of take a shortcut and not use it at all.
Yeah, they use a lot of nutmeg and cinnamon and stuff like that to get the flavor out.
Yeah.
Okay, so apparently, according to Mental Floss, Food and Wine reports that cans of pumpkin puree, even those that advertise 100% pumpkin, are actually made of a range of different squashes. I don't care. It tastes good to me.
Yeah.
Hey, that's all that matters in the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love. Yeah. Thank you for that question. Now I'm going to go on a baking spree this weekend. But so what exactly even starts the process of brewing? Like, how do you find the ingredients? I wouldn't know where to even begin. Do you order it online? Are there local places?
Either or, honestly.
Yeah. Like there are a lot of really great online stores that you can use, and like Ryan alluded to earlier, they have these kits that kind of come with all the stuff you need to make a specific kind of beer, and that can be a really great place for new brewers. Lost the light.
Oh no!
Here,
Someone out there got mad.
I'm gonna move more into the light over
Move
here.
into the lights.
Yeah, I'll go check that in a second. But yeah, that's a great place to start for a lot of people. And I believe, maybe a decade ago, they kind of a lot of kits had a reputation as not being super great, but anymore that's just not true at all. Like you're going to make a really solid beer if you follow the instructions and do everything right. But also, like you probably, if you were to do a bit of online searching, would find that you have like a local shop that sells home brewing ingredients, and you probably just don't realize it. But like most communities have like a local homebrew shop somewhere.
Yeah,
And so you can also go there, and that can be really helpful just to have like someone to talk to ask questions, and particularly if you're trying to write a recipe for yourself, or you don't want to make sure you have all the right equipment or something, it can be helpful to have the store owner to talk to.
Yeah, and a lot of times breweries will do it too,
Right.
where they will actually like have a brew store connected with the brewery. Since they already have pretty much everything there, they order more in bulk so they can have ingredients for people to actually go out and buy ingredients, and they'll build the kits in store. So like you'll have very, very fresh ingredients when you're getting kits. So, freshly done grains, freshly crushed for you, and fresh ingredients if you had an extra stuff in there. So it's very easy. I mean, it takes a little research, but you can definitely find some. I found out where I live, I have probably about 3 that I could easily go to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think almost the bigger challenge is getting all of the equipment and stuff. That's kind of one of the bummers. Like, I mean, you could always go to like Bed Bath and get a Mr. Beer or something if you want to start really simple. But there is kind of a startup cost, unfortunately. I feel like a lot of people have gotten into home brewing at one point or another because it seems like it's going to be cheaper than buying beer. But then there's always that with any hobby, you're like, oh, but like there's this newfangled this thing that I could upgrade to, and like, oh, I could get this, and like the equipment ends up kind of being a slippery slope of cost.
Oh,
But if you just want to cover your bases, it's kind of like one initial startup cost. You buy the stuff that you need, and then that can last you a while as long as you're willing to kind of do things the kind of the old classic hard way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for the equipment, is that something, again, that would be available at these supply stores?
Oh, yeah, easily.
Yes, definitely.
Amazon. Honestly, I bought my initial kit through Amazon. So it had
Did you?
all the initial like buckets and carboys and brushes and siphons and everything else. So I bought a kit on Amazon.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't actually. I guess I've never thought of that. It makes sense they'd have those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would also say, like, if you found a homebrew shop in your area, if you just went in and said, hi, I've never done this before and would like to, give me an economical setup, please, help me do this on the cheap. They could probably point you at
Easily.
kind of the minimum equipment that you would need and give you some pointers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They, in my experience, anyone who runs those shops they're always like unfailingly nice people. It's kind of like a lot of areas of the gaming community, especially like the gaming like podcast community, where it seems like everybody you like see or meet seems at least to be a really nice, easygoing, willing to help type person.
Mm-hmm.
I think whenever you start talking to people about something they really love and they're really passionate about, that's when their eyes light up and they just their joy spills through. So of course they're going to want to share that joy with whoever is willing to listen.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So
I guess, if they really love beer and they run a homebrew shop, it's like every conversation is like that like, oh my God, you asked me about my favorite thing in the whole wide world.
How did you know it's my favorite thing?
Did the shop I own give it away?
Yeah.
So I know we don't have visuals right now, but what are some of the pieces of equipment? Can you kind of tell us about what is involved, like the kind of the technical aspects, the tools?
Probably the main ones you get. Well, the main one to start with is a big old kettle. So I have a Bayou Classic. It's supposed to be made for like deep frying, 5 gallons, and it's easy, simple kettle to use, and you just boil. That's where you boil everything in. And I think, Mike, you have a couple other things to go with that. It's because you do a little more than I do.
Yeah. I mean, the kettle is definitely like the biggest thing, and then a means to heat it.
Hmm.
So Ryan, do you use like a turkey cooker or a propane burner?
I use my kitchen, but I have a gas stove.
Oh,
So
you do it. I didn't know that. Yeah, because you make smaller batches.
yeah,
So yeah, you can do it on a range if you're making smaller batches, but like we do 5 gallon batches, but that means like since the grains like soak up some water, we really end up using, I don't know, like 8 gallons of water or something like that. So that would take forever on our range. So we use like a turkey cooker propane burner. Um, and then there's like some minor stuff like a big old spoon to stir and um, those sorts of things. But probably like after the kettle, if you're doing kind of the simplest, the more simple styles of brewing, because there's like a lot of different processes you can use, you can get away with a big kettle and then some kind of siphon. And then you would need some sort of vessel that you're going to be fermenting in. So you can use they sell plastic buckets, glass carboys. There's like essentially giant, like 5 gallon bottles, more, I guess is the best
yeah,
I can describe it. Um, or you can use, like, I actually use spare kegs. So we ferment in one keg and then transfer it to another keg. And then I guess that's the last thing is you need something to serve out of. So once it's done fermenting, you got to take it out of there. And you either need to have like a kegerator or a keezer, which anymore you can buy at like Costco if you want to spend the
yeah,
money on it. Or you need like a bottling setup. So just a bunch of bottles. And then there's like this little cap snapper thing that you use
yeah,
to put the caps on.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's probably like the simplest. Like you can really get away without much, but then if you wanna measure anything about it, then that's more. If you wanna kind of, yeah, like then depending on it can get way more complicated from there. But that's
yeah.
probably the
Your
baseline.
basic, yeah.
So, what would you say is the most challenging step of brewing beer? Like, is there a part, or is there a part that stresses you out? Maybe.
um,
Uh,
I was gonna say mine is probably this. I do a secondary re-rack, and that's where I usually add a lot of my flavors. And so I always worry how, especially the first time doing a recipe, is how those are going to work. And I've had good experiences, I have bad experiences with it. So um, it's always a gamble to see when you add something else to it, will it change a lot or not change enough or change in a bad way or a good way? It's kind of gives me a little bit of anxiety to know that I might have had just really, really good beer there without adding anything to it, and then I added something to it, and I just made
right.
it the worst thing in the world.
You threw in a habanero pepper, and next thing you know,
Oh
Yes.
no! Before.
yeah.
I have not.
Um,
Oh, okay. I didn't know if that was
no, he hasn't. He hasn't.
hilarious if you got that dramatic with it.
I mean, maybe it's on the horizon somewhere, Ryan. You never know.
I'm about to say I've had pepper beer before. It's really good,
It's
so
pretty
I might
good.
try it.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
Oh yeah.
For me, I don't know. Like for like for weddings, there's like this kind of saying that like there's always like a bump. There's always like something that doesn't quite go as planned on like the day of your wedding. I feel like brew days go like that for at least for us in our experience. There's like always when we start, it's always like, okay, what's it going to be this time? There's always going to be something that doesn't go to plan. And for me, it's usually just like dealing with that, like in the moment problem solving. It's kind of fun. It's more fun now that we have a little bit more know-how and don't feel so helpless when something goes wrong. But that's usually ends up being the most stressful part. That or like, just equipment malfunctions, things not, either something gets clogged or stuck or, just isn't doing what you want. Or, I go to transfer something with CO2 and my CO2 tank is empty because there was a leak somewhere.
Mm.
That's been what I've been dealing with lately. That's a real life example.
So that would be
But
you invite people for a barbecue and you're out of propane.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Only, yeah, like rather than like your local gas station selling it, you've got to make your way to like our nearest homebrew store is like 20 minutes away. So that would be a bummer.
Oh my gosh. So
Um,
there's a lot involved.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, ultimately it's just It's just beer. So, even if something goes wrong and you have to dump a batch, like you're out some money and some time, but like no one's dying. It's,
No.
I'm about to say, and
like
I've done my
at
fair
the end
share.
of the day, it's like I probably end up stressing out mostly because I'm just taking it way too seriously because it like becomes a point of pride. But ultimately, it's like it's a hobby for fun, making a thing that exists like to help people have fun and like sort of exists for like, fun social situations. So it's not that bad if you can just learn to look at it as not a big deal.
Were you going to say something, Ryan?
Oh no, I mean, like I said, I've thrown out beer. I'm actually, unfortunately, about to throw out a batch right now because it went bad. So Mike knows about this. I did it last year. I did a cucumber kolsch, and it was really good the first week or so, and then you could taste the cucumber went bad. So I ended up dumping it last year, and I tried a different method to get the flavor, and it happened again. So I have about 3 gallons of I have three
I
gallons
hadn't heard
of beer I
that.
got
That's
dumped
terrible
out.
news.
I know that's why I don't have anything on tap because that was on tap, and I tried it last night, and it was sour. I'm like, oh, I gotta throw this out again.
Oh my gosh.
That's a shame.
So I'm trying to think of like the time frame for these things. So let's say you wake up one day, you're like, I want to brew. How long is that the first few steps? How long are the first few steps going to take on that first day?
About 4 hours, 3 4 hours, I'd say, altogether.
Yeah, it takes longer for us. We do a slightly more complicated process, and it ends up. I mean, part of it's that we have to wrangle our toddler the whole time too, but it usually ends up probably being I don't know, a 6 or 7 hour process for us, like from inception to like cleanup.
Wow. And then you play the waiting game.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's
So you ferment for at least a week, sometimes two, depending on what you got going on. And that pretty much fermentation is you making your alcohol. You put your yeast in there, and you'll watch the bubbles form through your little top bubbler thing. Um, and once you see that that's finally stopped, then that's how you know it's done, and then you move on to the next phase. Most likely, you're just going to go straight to kegging unless you're going to do something like me with secondary. But then you keg it or bottle it, and like Mike said earlier, bottling takes 2 weeks. Kegging, you can I turbo keg, and so I can get it ready to go in like 30 minutes. But I think you do it a little bit slower, Mike. You do it like a day or two.
yeah, we do. Yeah, Ryan, you reminded me. I just to, I guess, return to the question about like the most stressful parts. I wouldn't say stressful, but like in terms of like holding your breath when you're done brewing for the day and you pitch your yeast, then there can be like, I don't know, anywhere from just a couple hours latency to like days before they start doing anything, before you start seeing like the bubbles and like the activity. And that is always like it feels like you're just kind of, doing an incantation or something and going like blowing some pixie dust and going like, oh, sorry,
Make bubbles.
please, please work, little guys.
Whatever's out there in the universe, please bless this batch.
Go out and do your job, little yeast. Yeah. So that's always a great feeling when you see the bubbles for the first time and you know that like think you're good. Things are rolling. Yeah.
That is, oh gosh. So can you guys teach me some terminology and the listeners, can you teach us some words that might not be thrown around in daily conversation?
Like anything in particular?
Like any kind of
Like you're just looking to
ingredient.
impress your friends?
Like pretend okay, let's say like I like Not Your Father's root beer, for example. Like, oh, this tastes really good. So can you tell me what are some technical terms or what are some pieces of equipment? What are some ingredients involved in the brewing process?
Well, the holy what is it? The Trinity of
The
beer is
Triforce of
the Triforce of beer, actually. Yeah, is grain of some sort, hops, and yeast. So for the most
and
part,
water,
that's and water, of course. Yeah.
but
So
it's not a Triforce if you throw in water, so we leave that out.
yeah.
It could be Helia. It could be the goddess Helia.
There
There
we
you go. Yeah, yeah. Right. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Because it all really comes from the water, right? You know?
yeah. But so grains you can use. I mean, any kind of grain out there, and even because I do this, Mike, you don't, but I use extracts as well. So you can actually buy grain extract of a beer. So you can go to a store and be like, I want a light beer. They'll have like kind of a extract specifically for that. You won't have to buy any grains. You won't have to do any extra work. You literally just pour the extract in there, and it gets you your sugars that you would pull from the grain when you soak it in the water. So it makes it a little easier and less
Like,
time consuming.
like does the first step for you,
Yeah.
more or less,
hmm
at the expense of a little bit of flexibility, I
Yeah.
guess,
Yeah.
because then you're stuck with what they have on offer. But
Yeah, and then hops are a wonderful little flower that grows pretty much everywhere as far as I'm aware. But you can, I mean, they're growing here in Michigan. Last I heard, they're growing their own kind of strains as well.
tons in
Yeah,
Michigan.
a ton. Yeah. So that gives you your bitterness or your kind of floralness as well. And then the yeast is just like any yeast that you would buy. It's just a specific strain made for beer, and you pitch that in. It eats up all the sugar that's in there from the grains and anything else you might put in there. And once as it's eating that sugar, that makes the alcohol that you get in your beer. So the more sugar, the stronger the beer.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I didn't know that the sugar was so important in that
Oh
process.
yeah. Oh yeah. If you make like a Belgian style beer, which usually has a lot of sweetness to it, it's usually a very strong beer, can range, I mean, what Final Absolution, not Final, yeah, Final Absolution is what, 12%, Mike?
10, I think.
10, yeah. But
Yeah.
still, for a beer, that's pretty high
A
considering
lot.
Bud Light is 5.
Yeah, that's basically the sugar is the food that that the yeast eat, and then the output is alcohol. So more sugars from the grain means a stronger beer once they're done eating all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually think you mentioned Not Your Father's root beer. I think for things like that end up kind of on the sweeter side, if they are fermenting it, you either have to use like a sugar like lactose that the yeast can't eat, which I would assume they don't do for that, but you'll see beers that do that.
Mm-hmm.
Or you have to pasteurize the beer and then back sweeten it afterwards with sugar, which I think is what they do for Not Your Fathers. I mean, I would assume I don't really know anything about that particular product, but a lot of things like that are just back sweetened after fermentation.
That's kind of cool seeing behind the curtain like that.
Yeah, and I mean, you take it all with a grain of salt. Like I think one of the things that we really wanted to capture with our podcast was the fact that neither of us are experts. We're like both firmly in the amateur camp, and not even, we're compared to a lot of, you can find other podcasts even out there, like the Beersmith podcast, or like my favorite is one called Brewlosophy, where they're home brewers but people who have been doing it for like decades. So one of the things that we really wanted to capture is that kind of that period of time when you've got your feet set, but you're new into a hobby, and you've got that, like, I'm sure you can relate. There's like a certain kind of sort of like momentum that you have when you really, really get in deep to a hobby, like for the first time. And there's like an excitement that's not that it fades like later on, but it kind of changes. And that was sort of one thing we wanted to try and capture, was like that part of the curve of, being a home brewer. So, with that said, everything that we say should be taken like with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
We're just two guys that that like this hobby and like beer, and we've picked up little bits of knowledge here and there.
So whenever it comes to the final product, if you found one that you really like, have you made it multiple times?
I have. So I rotate through beers every season. So there's a few beers that I've done quite a few times. I do a coffee ale that I've done about 3 times now. And I do adjust as I needed with each one, but like for the most part, it stays the same. So as soon as I got a recipe that works and doesn't have an issue, it stays put, and I don't try and mess with anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't made, at least recently, we haven't, we tend to kind of rove around and try different things. I'm sure we'll eventually settle in on some kind of repeated recipes. We have some that we really want to make again that turned out really well this year, but I kind of have, I really enjoy, especially making kind of weirder styles that are not in the sense like where like Ryan will add, clever extra ingredients, but like the California Common I was talking about earlier. Like part of the reason we made that is because there just aren't many of them, and they're kind of hard to find in stores, but it's yummy.
Yeah.
But there are so many styles like that my attention span for anyone has been kind of short so far. We've done one thing, and then it's usually by the time it's ready, I'm like, okay, but I'm really, really stoked about doing this next thing that I just heard about.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
So I would assume the most rewarding part of brewing is having a delicious final product, but
Yes.
is that only one rewarding aspect, or are there some other rewarding aspects that might not be so obvious?
I love sharing it myself. I love like having other people drink it and try it, and whether good or bad, like it's still just fun seeing what other people think about beer and everything else. So I love sharing with people. And I know when I first brewed in college, I was just giving it away in 6-packs because I was doing so I would be at work and someone like people found out I was homebrewing and they'd be like, well, can I get some? I go, do you want a 6-pack? They're like, yeah, okay, I'll bring you a 6-pack tomorrow. Just meet me by my car.
What a guy.
So you would actually put it into different bottles or cans?
Bottles. So when you bottle beer, like you can buy bottles at a store like you would, or you can just anything that's not a twist off bottle. So Miller Lite and all those can't be used. But like if it's a regular like pry off bottle cap, you can clean those bottles out and reuse them. And that's what we did a lot of the times. So you put the beer in there, you put the cap on, and then with that you do have to wait 2 weeks. But after 2 weeks, you crack it open and drink it like a regular beer. And so I just give out 6-packs of them to friends and such.
That's cool.
It's a bit of a pain because you do have to, like, if you're doing a 5-gallon batch, which we were doing back then, that's 50 beers that you have to and cap with each one. So,
oh my gosh. So it's been fermenting in this huge jug, and you have to pour that into the different bottles?
It's easier with a siphon. So yeah, you use a siphon to get in there and everything else. And then you put a little bit of, they call it priming sugar. It's a special sugar that you put in there that starts carbonation within the bottle. And then you put the cap on and let it sit for 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, it should be ready to drink with carbonation.
Okay, I'm glad you have a siphon because I was picturing a very
like a long pour, yeah.
I mean, that's how I had really good muscles back then, and I was just holding that giant jug.
I like those water jugs at offices.
Yes, that's actually a really good. That's a really good approximation of like what a carboy looks like. Actually, one of those like those big water jugs that they use in. Yeah.
That's what I was picturing. You guys just pouring into bottles.
Like long pouring into a bottle out of there.
Yes.
Ryan, that'd be impressive. I'd love to see it.
I'm out of practice, man.
Well, there's a thing called YouTube if you want to get some views, I guess.
Oh my God, yeah. You could be in, those like compilations they do of like people, throwing basketballs backwards, off the 6 walls and then it goes in. If you could long pour, man, yeah, you'd be a viral sensation
And you have to do it holding it backwards
Oh, okay.
with a blindfold
Bring
on.
me back into this.
after spinning around on a baseball bat.
Right.
Oh,
And
wow.
on one foot.
Oh
Okay,
my
you guys think
God.
that's too hard now.
Poor
Yeah.
Ryan. I think we just killed him. Is there a rewarding aspect that we didn't bring up for you, Mike?
Well, honestly, yeah, that one's probably the biggest for me too. Like, one of the my wife and I really enjoy hosting. Having friends over at the house, having family parties at the house, and just having our own beer on tap just kind of felt like a really cool extension of that. Like, kind of just another way to sort of, for lack of a better, well, I guess it's that, and then I would also say kind of related to that, like it's sort of a way to express ourselves, like the choices you make, the beer you choose to make, and I usually go through and like each one gets a name, and I'll mock up a little design for it and print like a little card, with a little logo or something. So it's just kind of, it's like a fun flavor thing for parties, which super great in October of 2020. Lots of parties have been had this year. So it's been kind of a bummer, particularly because we've really got into the swing of it like a month before lockdown. So we've been doing it a lot because it's fun, but really no one to share it with.
That is so depressing. That is another really depressing part of 2020. I mean, I understand the reasons, but I like to bake and I can't eat this entire cake by myself.
Yeah. Or like even more dangerously, if you have no one to share it with, you might eat all of it yourself.
Yes.
And you're going to feel like crap for 2 days.
Yeah, in May I made a coconut cake because Timmy, my boyfriend, wanted one, and we tossed a good bit of it out.
Mm.
Poor coconut cake. I
Yeah,
know.
R.I.P.
How long after you have the finished product and it's ready to drink? Because Ryan, you were talking about how the cucumber one went bad. So wine supposedly it gets better with age. I take that that's not the case with beer.
I mean, there is a shelf life for beer. If you actually, I think if you look at bottles and cans, some of them mark down when the expiration date is. I know Sam Adams does for sure, but I know a few other breweries do that as well. The reason the cucumber went bad, I think it is because of the cucumber. So the extra flavors can hinder how long it lasts. A general beer probably lasts, what, Mike, a few months, I would say, at least.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of factors like hoppier beers will tend to they'll taste less fresh more quickly because the compounds that hops add to beer, like Celeste, I don't know if you like IPA, but or
I'm not very well versed. I'm so sorry.
okay, no, yeah, like basically any style with a lot of hops in it, those compounds they're a bit more volatile, and so I think a lot of it's driven by oxygen. Like if you can prevent a lot of oxygen exposure to your beer, you can make it last longer. And if it's stronger, like has higher alcohol, it'll last longer because that'll prohibit things from growing in it, things you don't want, like bacteria and stuff. And then if you have more hops, usually it won't like spoil per se, but it'll just kind of start to taste less fresh and like the flavor will pop less. So yeah, that's kind of the long answer to a very short question.
No, I love it. I'm not familiar with that. I mean, I know that if you open up a can and there's any left the next morning and you didn't finish it, it's probably not still good, right?
I don't want
flat.
to. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like yeah. That's
You don't want any of that.
no.
So what are some of your favorite memories of brewing? Is there a certain event or a certain flavor that just brings you so much joy when you think about it?
I gotta think this one.
Well, one thing I'll say, going back to the idea that we really both enjoy sort of serving our beer to our friends and stuff. Like that's a big part of it. I remember we had a 4th of July party here, and this was before we were brewing at the house, but I brewed with my buddy from college. We kind of did, one for old time's sake. And so I had that on tap, and Ryan brought a keg of his over, and it was like a big family and friends party, probably like, I don't know, 50 people or something like that. And like, I think Ryan's was half the size of mine because his batches are smaller, but his was almost entirely gone. And mine was like, I don't know, 3/4 gone. And they had both been full at the beginning of the day. And it was just like, it was just a really good memory. Like it was just like kind of like I described earlier. A lot of people sort of found it to be just like a fun little extra thing that gave the gathering some character. It was something for people to talk about. Like, there was a big group of people kind of, at a lot of parties, people just end up sort of congregating near the food or near the drinks. And so like there were people that didn't know each other that were just sitting there kind of poaching the kegs and ended up like meeting, talking about the beers, and then like hitting it off and becoming friends. Sort of, because of the beers we'd made. And that was just a really memorable thing, like what a positive, cool influence that had on that gathering. That's the first thing that comes to mind for me.
My heart just got like 3 sizes bigger, like the Grinch or something. It's so sweet.
Yeah, we need some feel good moments like that right now, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Remember the good times.
I would probably say something similar to that actually. Mal has a friend who also brews as well. And they just got married, and for their wedding they actually asked me to brew. So I did one of my recipes and I did 2 of theirs. They came over and we all kind of brewed together in one big day, 3 different batches of beer going at once. And then they left everything here and I took care of all the secondary process, and they had quite a bit. So like which one did I did? I call it the Dude, which is the coffee ale. I love the basket. So, yes, I love the basket. So I did that, and it's got coconut, white chocolate, and coffee in it as well. So I did that for them, and then they had what was it? A dark chocolate orange porter. So it had orange juice and dark chocolate nibs in it. And then they also did a beer that is supposed to be gluten-free, so it had no grains in it, it had no hops in it, and they added strawberry puree to it as well. It's very, very good. I brought all the beers to the wedding, and they actually gave me it's like a button-up shirt that had my name with Brewmaster on it, and then the logo as well, because I named my brewery, though it's not really a brewery, and I have a weird logo for it as well. And they gave that to me at the wedding, and so I could show off that I was the brewmaster for their wedding.
So that people could pay you compliments.
That's so sweet.
And it was a great hit. I mean, all 3 beers. I think I had a couple left in mine, and I think both of the 2 of theirs each had a couple left as well. Like they drank them all, so they enjoyed it.
That's really awesome. I mean, that's a precious memory right there.
Yeah.
For sure. So what are some things that inspired you to make the podcast? We kind of talked about it a little off the air, but I want to know what instigated this.
So I was going to say, Ryan, you should probably start because it was your idea.
So I doing the podcast with AZP. The first one that we did was the quiz one, and I had a ball with it. It was so much fun. And
Ryan, can you quick? I think that was off the air. Can you define AZP for people?
For AZP, it's another Zelda podcast. I do a lot with them and help them out, and I did a couple episodes. And it was so much fun to do. I had such a ball doing it, and then we did another episode with my wife Mallory and I did for them as well. had fun again, and I'm like, you know what? This is a fun thing to do. Just to not think of weekend or not think of work, not think of responsibilities, not think of pandemic and everything else. So I want to do something. And I had a few ideas, and then I kind of just narrowed it down to beer, and I'm like, I wonder if Mike wants to do this with me. So
Yeah.
I reached out, and like, because I was worried, because I know you had your little one, and I knew that it might be a little bit of a difficulty there, but I wanted to see if you were interested, and clearly you were.
Yeah. To be honest, I was like a little nervous about the idea at first because I know this is another thing we talked about a little bit before we started recording, but like I'm not exceptionally plugged in general, like I don't really I'm mostly just a voyeur on Facebook. I don't have a Twitter, like so that whole kind of like world was something I was like, is this really something that I want to do, like the whole sharing online thing? But I really love podcasts, and I think one of the coolest things that podcasts do, like if you find one about a topic you like, is it's just kind of not that you should need an excuse, but like it's an excuse to really, really nerd out and have like a very structured conversation about something you like a lot. And so, like to use another Zelda podcast as an example, like, when they have their like top 10 boss battles or whatever, like that is probably that version of that conversation is not something that you are just going to have in your normal day. Talk about how
I
good
wish.
you were playing Breath of the Wild the other day, and this is how I felt about this. I just did this boss battle or whatever. But like, it would feel kind of artificial to be like, all right, guys, we're each going to come up with 10, all right, and then stick with me. We're going to go around the room, but like a podcast kind of gives you an excuse to do stuff like that. And so when Ryan pitched the idea to me, we sort of took a week to generate some ideas. And like I said, I was a little skeptical at first, but I did my due diligence. I wrote down some ideas. He wrote down some ideas, and then we sort of were sharing them, and just having an excuse to talk about all the stuff we were coming up with just sounded like a lot of fun. If nothing else, if we would have a really, really great time recording. And so I was basically in after that.
I listened to the first episode today about the misadventures. That was fun.
Yeah. Those are some other memorable. Nothing's quite as memorable as when it all goes downhill.
But that's how you learn.
Yeah, and kind of like I alluded to earlier, we're not deluding ourselves into thinking we're like some sort of authority. We hope that people who just maybe have an interest in brewing but haven't pulled the trigger, or who are just interested in beer and curious about how brewing works, will like the podcast. But we weren't really ever setting out to be an authority that people would come to for like the final word on things. So we thought that was a good topic as just like kind of a tone setter. We are not holier than thou. Like, things have gone very wrong for both of us.
And we will be doing that episode more and more, because clearly we have more and more stories to tell with our misadventures.
Yeah.
So that'll be a recurring theme.
Yeah. I mean, supposedly it took Edison thousands of tries before the light bulb worked, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You don't know until you dive in and you try things. And when it comes to writing, for example, you have to edit and edit and edit.
Yeah.
So
draft one, you always have to expect draft one's going to be crap.
Yes. You just have to dive in head first with those kind of things.
That's very flattering that you're comparing our beer making excursions to inventing the light bulb. It's really very flattering.
Well, I think beer is useful. I think light bulbs are useful.
Yeah, I mean, all right, that.
I see where you're coming from. So.
But what are some other things you guys would like to talk about with brewing? Is there anything that that's brewing right now, or you'll be brewing this weekend or sometime soon?
Ryan?
I am currently brewing a hybrid of a beer. I'm actually trying to combine two different beer styles together into one. So I don't know how it's going to turn out. I will probably let everyone know. We'll probably do an episode about it.
Yeah.
Um, I'll
Ryan
probably,
will share
I,
all his handles and stuff at the end, and you can check the airwaves for updates
yeah,
on this one.
but yeah. So I don't know how this will turn out. I did it once a couple of years ago, and it did not work. Like I did not even get to kegging stage. It did not work. So I'm trying it again and seeing how it turns out. This could be another misadventure. I don't know. Um, like I said earlier, I had a cucumber kolsch that is no longer good, and I am planning my stout actually, my shortened stout coming up here in a few weeks.
I love that name.
What about you,
Yeah,
Mike?
I'm excited for the short and stout. It's one of my favorites that Ryan makes. It's just kind of become it. We do a our like siblings and us do a like a either Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit movie marathon every year, where we there's like that quote like we've had one breakfast, but what about second breakfast, elevensies, luncheon? And so it's been like a tradition for us for the last few years where we get together and we make all like there's like 7 Hobbit meals, and then we watch one of the movie trilogies, and it's sort of become like a sub tradition that Ryan brings his short and stout every Hobbit day. And
Yep.
yeah,
Hobbit Day!
exciting times. Yeah.
Is there anything that you have brewing, Mike?
Yeah, we just kegged an IPA actually. This will be my first experience writing a recipe for one. Like I said, we made a bunch in college, but my roommate, my Jedi Master, wrote all the recipes. So curious to see how this one turns out. But we are right now. Our first beer roughly coincided with when our daughter was born, and so we named it Firstborn because it was like the first one that Haley and I had brewed together, and it was kind of like, in commemoration of her birth. And so we have another little one on the way, and so we're going to try and make some kind of like a Guinness clone. And that one's, I don't know if we're going to call it Secondborn or whatever, but that's kind of a fun, exciting thing. Like, it just not that like having a kid isn't like exciting in and of itself, but it's just kind of another like outlet for that, is working on this recipe to try and make it really good. Like we've started way in advance. And I've been like kind of tinkering with it. It's just fun to think about. Yeah. Cause it's going to be exciting times, and we're going to need it for a couple months,
That
or
is
at least I
awesome.
will.
I love hearing people talk about their passions. Life has enough downers in it. So hearing people get excited about something, even if I am not familiar with it or I know very little about it, I don't know, it's just inspiring because you can tell whenever joy radiates off somebody and it makes you happy
Yeah.
as well. And it's very easy to get caught in routines with work and life, family responsibilities. So I think it's really important that people have outlets and hobbies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
so.
definitely.
So you guys, in addition to brewing, you have another hobby with the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
Awesome.
like busy.
It's
It's like
almost,
a hobby within a hobby.
Yes.
yeah, it kind of reminds me
Inception.
of a journal. Like you're almost chronicling your adventures in brewing.
Yeah, and I well, hopefully too, we've got some ideas. It's nothing we've pulled the trigger on yet, but like we're hoping that doing the podcast will sort of get us to try some, like we've got some ideas for these fun, like not quite competitions, but sort of like brew offs where we each make a different beer based around a theme, or where we make one beer and then each put our own spin on it, or I think it just should hopefully they should play off each other a little bit and lead us down some fun avenues to try things that maybe if we hadn't done the podcast we wouldn't have tried before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind of that's igniting another flame.
Yeah.
There. That's awesome. Well, thank you guys both so much. Is there anything else you'd like to say about brewing or beer in general?
No, not for me. I would just say, well, I guess I'd say if it sounds like fun, give it a try. It's like I said, it's low stakes. If you mess it up, it's just beer, and it's fun to kind of if you like hosting and or just if you just enjoy beer for yourself, it's fun to at least try once. Doing the process for yourself. If nothing else, it gives you an appreciation of what goes into making it. And then, I guess also I would just wanted to thank you for having us on. This has been a kind of a really fun opportunity. And, obviously a little bit of PR for the podcast is always great. Yeah. But this was a really fun conversation. It was really nice getting to kind of chat with you about things.
I enjoy it. I wish I could do this like 8 hours a day. I love it.
Maybe someday.
Maybe, but I love it. I love meeting people. I mean, I met Ryan virtually, not in real life yet. One day when there's not a pandemic going
it still counts.
But I love hearing what people are doing, and I love learning. And like I said, people, their faces just light up whenever they get to talk about stuff they like. So, well, thank you guys so much for joining me and sharing Brewthers-in-Law with us and your adventures in brewing. Ryan, where can people find you if they'd like to follow you?
So mostly I am on Twitter. My handle is Rambo Kuhn. Just Rambo, and my last name is Kuhn. I also have another Twitter handle for the brewery that I have, which is Wise Old Owls Brew.
You don't need the air quotes, man. Just own it.
I know. And I post on there what I'm brewing, if anything's going on, stuff like that. So I usually, whenever I'm brewing, brew day especially, I'm posting a lot on there of how everything's going and what I'm doing. I'm on Another Zelda Podcast as well, which the website is anotherzeldapodcast.com. And I think that's it, besides the Brewthers-in-Law stuff.
You have a brew blog too, I have down.
Oh, yes. I forgot about that. I've been too busy with a lot of things.
Yeah.
So
social media presence is too big to keep in one head.
I know, right? So I do have a separate blog that I post on there every so often, and it is hopbrewandblog.com.
Very nice. Thank you for that, Ryan. And Michael, I know you said that you don't really use Twitter, but is there anywhere people can find you, like with Brewthers-in-Law, perhaps?
Yeah, I was going to say, if anyone wants to get a hold of me, they can do so through our podcast. So that we do have a podcast Twitter handle, which is Brewthers-in-Law. I believe is it Brewthers-in-Law, Ryan, or Brewthers-in-Law Podcast?
Brewthers-in-Law.
Okay, so that's BREW, like a brew. THERS in law, all one word. Mm-hmm. And then I believe same kind of spelling, Brewthers-in-Law. We have a website up as well. I think it's brewthers-in-law.com.
That's so exciting. I really enjoyed the first episode, and it's just cool just hearing two guys talk about beer and their passions, and just it's chill, it's relaxing. I really like it. It feels human, like
we spilled a couple beers while recording too, so you'll hear that in the podcast. So,
oh, not this one, right?
You're talking about. No, in a few episodes, you will hear some clashes and spilling.
Very human. That's what Ryan's trying to get across.
Yes, very human.
Embarrassingly human.
It's all right. Don't cry over spilled beer.
I mean, I do.
Only cry a little bit.
Cry a little bit. Well, Ryan and Mike, thank you both so much for this 1v1. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. And listeners, you can find us on Boss Rush Games. You can find us with Another Zelda Podcast. And until next time, we'll see you later. Thanks again, guys.
Bye.